dark?
Yeah, because I don't have that much to say. This is mostly a visual. So he mentioned Frederica. I've never met her. I was really looking forward to seeing her presentation. I don't know what it was going to be. So all I had was a title to work on. But it turns out that I've spent the past, I don't know, 15 years taking pictures of bees and flowers. Like I said before, I've been a beekeeper since I was 24. But, and I'm like mid-30s, whatever. But in the course of those years, I decided to collect as many pictures of plants that attract bees as possible. And so, naturally, with honeybees on them, because it's always nice to show a picture of, I don't know, a clover blossom with honeybee on it. And you have to kind of promote beekeeping at the same time as showing off the flower photos. But as time went on, I started to see all these other bees. And I thought, wow, there's a whole bunch of other bees that I didn't know about as a beekeeper. And, you know, I've always been very fascinated by other flowers, not just bee flowers, but flowers in general. But I never really was really conscious of the other pollinators. So this has been a real eye-opener for me over the past 4 or 5 years, especially since I, met Kathy Calvin and got involved with the organization. I became more and more conscious of some of the other pollinators. And also, when you start looking in closely, we've seen a lot of aerial photographs and stuff like that. We're going to go in closer now. When you start looking in closely, you see quite a different world. I mean, here I was coming from the world of the beekeeping and American Bee Journal, and through that there's a theme of being attracted to the art of bees. But get rid of the text. There's no more text in this presentation. You guys have had enough text for today. There's nothing here to read. I don't have any facts. Taxonomy, this is one of my favorite topics. When I first moved, I moved up to New York State in 1990. When I first moved up there, I thought, I'm going to learn all the songbirds, the calls, bird calls. I can recognize all kinds of composers, all kinds of music. I can tell you if it's, Beatles or Rolling Stone. But I thought I could learn bird calls, right? I got the tape, and I listened to the tape over and over again. I think I picked up about 6. And I've heard of people that know about 2,500 different bird calls. So I thought, well, I could do the same thing with bees. I can learn the names of all these wild bees. And I can't learn them. I don't know their names. It's like we have bumblebees, honeybees, and other bees. But I do know the plants. I'm good with the plants. And this is one of my favorites. And I've always been really fascinated by the beauty of the clover. This is what you see as an overview. This is what the bee sees. Get in close and you realize it's not just one flower, it's a whole series of florets. And all of the clover plants, all of the different legumes, appear to be attractive and beneficial to bees. But the thing that interests me is that the similarity in the way they look. This one is a red clover, and to me it looks like pretty much like a crown. It's really a decorative plant. And this next one, this isn't a clover at all. This is a vet. We have in upstate New York, we have what we call the crown vet. That reminds me, I always use this to start off my honey plants presentation. I have a honey plants presentation that I do, but of course I didn't often do that because it's all upstate New York honey plants, and most of them, or at least a lot of them, wouldn't even recognize. And it wouldn't mean that much to you, but this is one of my favorites because it's just a voluptuous flower. This is alfalfa. We saw earlier a picture of alfalfa. Alfalfa, again, is a legume. And when you look at it from this perspective, the flowers are very, very similar. You can see why they would be attractive to pollinators. Okay, this is your generic bee. Has all the features of the bee. All the Hymenoptera have 4 wings. The flies have 2 wings. So this is what it looks like in real life. This, again, like I said, this is one of those other bees. And you can tell it's not a honeybee, obviously, because they have extremely long antennae. The antennae are my favorite sensory organ because they're just a multi-purpose organ. They're not only used for touching, but for smelling and for tasting. So basically, when a bee encounters a flower, she is touching, tasting, and smelling it at the same time with the antennae. And of course, they use these to communicate with each other, touching and tasting and smelling. This again is some sort of a wild bee. And you can start to see how their body is designed to attract pollen. There's some question in my mind as to whether static electricity is involved. I don't know if anybody's ever studied that, but you know how static electricity causes things to just cling to everything. Static cling, right? This again is another one of the wild bees. You can tell by the long antennae and the interesting, not a honeybee shape. I'm trying to figure out what that plant is. I guess I should have brought the key for all the plants. But at this distance, you can't really tell what plant it is, and it doesn't really matter. This is a bee's eye view. It's a place to come and get everything they need. This is what we call mountain mint, Pycnospharum. I don't know if you guys plant it around here. This is extremely attractive to all sorts of wild bees. My wife is a master gardener. She's been a gardener or a botanical gardener for most of her life. That's her only job she's ever had. And so she's the one that planted all the things around our house. And it's amazing. The choices that she made seem to have been perfectly designed to attract native bees. Because I have beehives in the yard. I go out in the backyard and I hardly ever see any honeybees. It's mostly native bees. I honestly don't know where they live, where they come from. I don't know where they go home to. But I think that one of the points that was emphasized here today is that if you want to attract bees, you want to plant a variety of things. And you want to expect to attract a variety of insects at the same time. Anybody recognize that flower? Okay, so I'm going to beg off on that one. So a couple of summers ago, they opened a new institute in central Pennsylvania called the Center for Pollinator Research. And they planted a pollinator garden. This is one of the pollinators they attracted. Some sort of a wasp. And this is a milkweed. There's a whole bunch of different milkweeds that grow wild in our area. Do you guys have a native milkweed at all? Dyslexia? Yeah. So again, most of my attraction to these plants and these insects is the way they look, not what they're providing necessarily. Just as a photographer, I wanted to mention that we've heard a lot of very important science and a lot of very important policy issues, et cetera, et cetera. I think one of the ways to get people to care about pollination and pollinators and the environment is to scare them. You do that. You don't do this is going to happen. But another way is to try to get people to just really love what we have, and for that reason we want to keep it. And it's like your family. You love your family. You would do anything you could to keep them well and take care of them. So that's why what I try to do is try to get people to love the environment. Even dudes like this. This is a mean-looking wasp, right? Well, if you look at this guy, like, how are we going to get rid of this guy? Right? This wasp was living on the side of my house, and I took the nest and put it on a table, took pictures of this wasp for the first, I don't know, like 20 minutes. The wasp didn't care. The wasp didn't try to sting me. This wasp, as long as this wasp the nest is still intact, she's not going to do anything. I don't know if you can see the eye. The eye is like agate. And that's one of the most fascinating things that I've noticed in photographing different kinds of insects is that bizarre and interesting eyes. can see the tongue. I don't know. You can see the tongue as she's poking it down into the. Their tongues are really, really interesting. It's not like we think of a straw. You know, we would suck, 7-Up out of a can with a straw. Well, their tongue is basically it's mouth parts that they are able to fold together and create with capillary traction. The fluid is just drawn up into their mouth. So Darwin, I talked about Darwin in the morning. Darwin was one of the people that was just totally fascinated by plants. And when Darwin saw this was a flower that he saw in Madagascar. I think they even call it Darwin's orchid. And when he saw this plant, he thought, the only way in the world there could be a plant this strange. You see the tube running down all the way down there. That's the nectar tube. Whatever gets the nectar out of this tube, it's got to have a tongue that long. And it was a good 50 to 100 years later that they actually found this moth with this tongue, like 12-inch, 18-inch tongue. And so, there's only one possible conclusion, is that somehow over time, the plant pulled the tongue back further and further. It pulled the tube back further and further, and the moths got longer and longer tongues, and this thing went on for hundreds of thousands of years, and ended up with a flower with this really deep tube, and moth with a really long tongue. So, but if you hang around flowers very much, you can't help but be fascinated by orchids. Most of these pictures that I have of the orchids naturally were taken in greenhouses. I live in upstate New York, and it's basically from Thanksgiving to Easter. You don't even want to go outside unless you do cross-country skiing, which I don't. But if you're a plant lover, it's a disaster because everything is frozen off, dies, and it just turns to ice. So a nice place to hang out is in greenhouses. This is one. I was doing an article on the floral scents and how the same kind of scents that are produced by plants are also used in the hive to communicate. They use that's basically their medium of communication is with scent, because obviously everyone knows that inside the hive it's completely pitch black. So the only way that they're going to be able to communicate is either by chatting, or in this case by they use scents, because they don't chat. The different odors, they have a whole rainbow of odors that they use to do their communication with. It's the medium that they use. And I say ironically, when you think about it, it's not that ironic that they would incorporate scents that are found in nature and found in plants to communicate with it. But I'll just say ironically, many of the same scents that they use are found in floral scents. And obviously the flower itself is using that scent to communicate as well. Most pollinating insects don't have that good eyesight. They can see the big picture, especially honeybees can see over a broad area and can orient over 3, 4, 5 miles. But up close, their vision is pretty hazy. So a scent is a very good way of advertising. Here I am, another orchid. I don't know, I'm just sort of a sucker for orchids. So this again is in the greenhouse. I actually tried to grow them in my house. And I don't know if you tried this. You buy the orchids in bloom, you bring it home, flower dies off in a couple of weeks, never comes back. Does anybody recognize this? You got it. Vanilla. Yeah, so when I was writing this article on honeybee scents and communication, it turns out that vanilla is one of the scents that is in the queen odor. And so I just really wanted to have a picture of a vanilla flower. So I went to all the different greenhouses and asked everybody if anybody knew of a vanilla plant. And it turns out there was one about 15 feet high that wasn't in bloom at the time, but fortunately it bloomed in time for me to get the picture so it could go in the article. This is a vanilla orchid. You know vanilla, the scent doesn't come from the flower, right? You know that, right? Yeah, okay. The smell of the flower is quite different. So in the first, Everybody was here this morning, right? In the beginning, I showed some fossil flowers. I showed one fossil flower. The very primitive early flowers were in the same family as this. This is the magnolia family. This is not a magnolia, but the shape of the flower is very similar to magnolia. You guys have magnolias around here. I've seen them. I don't think they're in bloom yet. But this is what's called a tulip tree. You have tulip trees here? They're down there? Oh, okay. So never mind. They're closely related to magnolias, and it took me a long time to get a picture of a tulip flower like this, because normally, where I come from, the tulip tree is the tallest tree in New York State, and they're frequently about this big around, and they'll go up about 100 feet, and then the branches start. So getting a picture of a flower in a tree like that, unless you have a helicopter, it's not working out. So, but I actually, like I said before, my wife works in a botanical garden, and they do have a huge arboretum. And I found out that they had a different variety of the tulip poplar, Lariodendron. It's not a poplar, it's not a tulip, with branches down low. And I was able to get this picture, a bunch of pictures of the tulip. And of course, I include this in my honey plants presentation. But in our area, it doesn't, I don't think it produces any honey. It's one of those ones that's in the books. So then you automatically put it in your presentation, and you have to say, well, this probably shouldn't be in here because the problem is that we don't have enough of it left. Tulip tree is such a great wood. It's too good to last. They've cut down most of them. It's in between a hardwood and a softwood. In other words, it's hard enough that you can make cabinet-grade, furniture out of it, but it's soft enough that it doesn't wreck your saws. And it's almost not free, because like I said, it'll go 100 feet straight up, 6 to 8 feet diameter, no branches, no knobs. This is your regular magnolia. This is taken in Atlanta. And this is, I don't know if you guys have these around here. Another magnolia. Yeah. This one comes on real early in the spring for us. Early in the spring for us is like May. So
hours in food.
And frequently, then you'll get a frost, of course, and it'll just trash them. It'll just turn all brown and fall. So there's a certain amount of sadness to watching flowers. This is, you guys recognize this? Night blooming Cereus. This is my pet. I keep this in the basement. And basically, no, I'm serious. I keep it in the basement. And the person that gave it to me told me, put it in the basement, coldest place you've got. Ignore it. Don't water it. Don't even look at it. And then in June, once all day the frost is over, for us that's Memorial Day, I bring it out and put it and start watering it like crazy. And then it blooms, and it blooms in a mysterious way. They told me, well, it's the night blooming Cereus. It blooms on the darkest night of the year. How it knows that, I'm not sure, but it's also not true because I studied it. And the idea was that it waits like, 14 days from the full moon and then blooms because there's not going to be a moon that night. That's completely nonsense. But it's fun to think that. Anyway, but it blooms for one night, so that's the cool thing. I mean, about 11:30 at night, it'll all come out in the bloom, and then by morning they're just hanging there. But this one, about 10 years ago they said we were going to have movies where you could smell stuff. That never happened. They got 3D movies, but they don't have movies where you can smell stuff. But if you could smell this is so enchanting. And as you get in closer, you can see it's a really intricate, complicated thing. And I've had it. Usually I bring it in to the summer porch when it starts to bloom because I'm afraid the deer are going to try to eat it. But a couple of times I've left it outside on the picnic table to see if it attracts anything. But I've never seen any insects come near this thing, despite the fact that it just smells amazing. You go in a little closer, you can see it just has a really strange and interesting shape. And obviously, I say obviously, seems obvious to me, that this plant is doing its level best to attract insects. And yes, sir?
Maybe it's trying to attract bats.
That's what I was thinking.
Pollinators.
Yeah.
Thanks for correcting me.
Yeah.
This plant is trying to attract pollinators of some sort. And it does get pollinated. It produces an interesting fruit that they sell. I think in the open markets they sell in Hawaii. It's kind of a little. It's related to cactus. It's a cactus, but it has no spines. It's very similar. When you look at it, the leaves look like a very large Christmas cactus, which I also have a Christmas
Is
cactus.
that the dragon fruit?
Yeah, that might be right.
Yeah, that's bat pollinated.
Bat pollinated. Yeah, but I have bats. We've got scats of bats.
They come in there.
No, it's outside. No, it's outside in the summer. Just in the basement in the winter. The bats in the basement. This is the night blooming Cereus, which again is the same sort of thing. It's got its peculiar method of cultivation. This guy told me, you take your night blooming Cereus, put it in the basement, and you try to kill it, and then about 3 weeks before Christmas, you bring it up in the house, and start watering it, and it blooms really great at Christmas time. And believe me, we hang on every plant, in the middle of winter time. My whole house, every single window's got plants that you can't even see out the window because there's so many plants there. But this one, I refuse to do that. I just treat it like a normal house plant. It blooms whenever the hell it feels like. And maybe it's not as exciting as having it all come into bloom at Christmas time. But I sort of like having half a dozen blooms spread out over a lot longer period. So this is another legume. This is you guys have Robinia? Robinia pseudoacacia?
Yes.
Black locust? Yeah, this one reminds me of something I wanted to mention. There's a lot of plants that are my favorite, and probably maybe your favorite plants that get on the invasive plant hit list. And when I did my first honey plants presentation, I think I was 3 slides into it, and this woman says, "Why are you showing that? That's an invasive plant." And I said, "Well, I'm just showing you the stuff that bees like, that they get attracted to pollen. I'm not judging for the plant." So this one gets on the invasive plant, even though it's a native. A lot of people don't realize there's a distinction between non-native and invasive. This is a native plant that is classified as an invasive because when it gets into an area, it just basically crowds out other things. And also, it's not native to our state, which puts it on a non-native list in some people's books. It belongs in North Carolina or something. I don't know where it belongs. But anyway, it's a legume, and legumes have a very interesting way of kind of presenting a ramp to the pollinators. So see, they come this way. It's like the guys waving flags to get the plane to land. And so the next series of pictures are different kinds of ramps. This is a catalpa. I don't know if you guys have catalpa here. So I should remind you that 99% of my pictures are taken in upstate New York. I do get out a little bit. I got some pictures from other states, but not that many. Yeah, this is a really cool one. This is related to milkweed. It's Apocynnum dogbane. I actually have never seen any insects on this, but if I was an insect, I wouldn't be able to pass it on. This is in close, again, trying to show how the plant is basically saying, come hither, and in the process, the pollen gets either knocked off onto the plant, onto the pollinator, in which case the pollinator is inadvertently pollinating if it's a nectar forager, or very frequently the pollinators will gather pollen at that point. You can see on the bottom petal there, pollen is just literally falling off of this thing. So that brings up another interesting point, is that plants, in order to get pollen, we could argue about that for hours. Obviously, wind pollinating plants scatter huge clouds of pollen into the wind, and with the idea that 1 out of a million is going to land on something and pollinate. Insect and plants that produce pollen that is consumed by pollinators and other animals have to compensate for the majority of the pollen being consumed by again, way out producing the amount of pollen that would really be required. But that seems to be nature's plan, is to just do things in a really big way, you know. If you need some seeds, just let's do 1 million seeds, or need some pollen, do tons of it. This again is just like, you know, I want to go there. I'm sorry the screen is so small. The last time I did this presentation, like I said, it was a big screen like this. I'm going, wow, is that my photograph? This is one of the ugliest plants. But this is our very first bloomer in the springtime. This is skunk cabbage. And I thought I was the one that saw the first skunk cabbage this spring, because I was out there, you know, searching in the snow to be the first one to see it. And this friend of mine said, "Oh, yeah, I saw skunk cabbage back in 18th February. You're late." But if you look in there, if you look in there, you can see the area where the pollen is produced. It basically is beckoning insects to come on in there. And it's weird because it's 20 degrees out. What insects are out? But it turns out, I just found out this winter, actually, I was reading a book about, you know, just nature lore. And they were talking about all the interesting, some kind of flies that are out and about, even if it's 30 degrees out. They're flying around looking for something to pollinate. Oh, there's a really interesting story about the skunk cabbage. This thing is a lot, you know, frequently buried in the snow. And when it starts to get ready to bloom in order to get pollinated, it actually melts the snow around it. And I have another picture I didn't include it this time. It's a circular little area where it's melting the snow away from it. So this one, I actually sent this slideshow to a friend of mine because he was looking for pictures. He goes, I really enjoyed your slideshow, but a friend of mine said, "Why do you have that picture in there? That plant doesn't get pollinated, and the insects die." I go, I know, this is a sundew. This is an example of how a plant is doing its level best to attract insects in order to eat them. So it's not all sweetness and light out there. So I'm sorry. This one, if you have hay fever, this one is just like, oh my God, get that away from me. This is some kind of a maple. We have tons of maples. They all bloom. See, a lot of people get hay fever in April, May, where I come from, and they look around and go, oh God, it's the dandelions or the crocus or something like that, because that's all they can see. They don't look up, and they don't realize that these flowering trees are just dumping bushels, tons and tons of pollen. And again, like I said, the only way they seem to be able to get the job done is to way overproduce pollen. Here it is on my arm, just piles of it. I've even seen pictures of it where it's just coating cars and stuff like that. But this is really the culprit for the early hay fever sufferers is tree pollen. For two reasons. One, because it's about 1 million times as much pollen as is coming out of your dandelions. And two, early in the season, most of the pollen is coming from trees altogether. Yeah, this has been a real bone of contention for me because in our area we have the emerald ash borer. It's not there yet, but we're expecting it to come. And the emerald ash borer comes and kills ash trees. So they've been talking about injecting the trees with insecticides. And I'm saying, hey, wait a minute, you can't be injecting ash trees with insecticides because it produces pollen. Bees collect pollen. Peter, don't be too tender about this. It's a wind-pollinated plant. Insects don't collect wind-pollinated pollen. Well, I know, and we know that now, you know. But these were entomologists saying, "Didn't you know it was wind-pollinated?" You know that the bees didn't know it was wind-pollinated. They think it's food. So, right. But unfortunately, the rest of the story is that in the course of trying to document bees collecting pollen from ash trees, I was never able to find any. So this is why you get hay fever, okay? this is the, well, I think the only picture in this show that I didn't take, because I don't have a scanning electron microscope. But that's why it's so irritating. Actually, that's not true. The reason why it's so irritating is because we're sensitized to proteins. But this is so gnarly, I can't not put it in there. This is what springtime in Ithaca looks like. This is a Cuba lake. It's one of the Finger Lakes. There's, I think, 11. There was when the gods created the Finger Lakes, they raked their hands over there like that and created these 11. You know, it was an 11-fingered god. So, but then there's a few other small lakes that always say, "Oh yeah, one of the Finger Lakes too, over here, over here." But the main Finger Lakes are Cuba, where Ithaca is located, and Seneca Lake, where Watkins Glen is. And these lakes are 40 miles long, about 3 miles wide, and almost 1,000 feet deep. So that's cherry. That's up close cherry. I don't know, cherry. I've always been, I got a red shirt on, red cherry. And here we're getting back to the pollinators. This apple. I don't know, most people don't think of apples in New York State together, but New York State used to be the foremost apple-producing state until West was settled. And it's still number 3. So this one, I just really thought this was cool. If you take pictures of insects and pollinators, you always want to get them caught in midair. But to really do it correctly, you have to have all kinds of fancy equipment. I don't have anything. This is like a $200 camera. And I just got lucky because the sun was glinting on the wings. This is our friend, the honeybee. This is one of the earliest flowers that blooms in my area. The name of it's escaped me again. It's one of the ones that, huh? Maybe. No, it's not buttercup, but it could be a form of ranunculus, yeah. And of course you can see this giant ball of pollen. Here, this is hawkweed. I guess you have. It's very similar to, looks very similar to dandelion, but it blooms way late in the season. He came up earlier that late in the season is a time when there's not as many things around. I thought this is one of the latest plants for us. In end of August, early September, it's a wildflower that comes into bloom. And it's attracted to all the different pollinators. This being the carpenter bee. Every single spring, and I don't know why she doesn't remember this, but my mother-in-law was saying, "Peter, there's carpenter bees. They're boring holes in the fascia board. Can you get rid of them?" And I said, "Mary, I don't get rid of bees." What are they doing? I mean, you've never been stung by one of these things. Just leave them alone. She goes, "Well, when Ed was still alive, he'd go out there with a can of something and just spray him." I said, "Well, I'm not doing that. I'm a bee." So this is just your standard issue milkweed, which I don't know if you have that here. But anyway, did you know that the thing tears the legs off the bees?
What?
See, they have a thing called pollinia. So they're not confident that the pollinator is going to do its job just by rubbing up against the pollen. They actually attach themselves to the pollinator, and this pollinator is going to go to another flower, another plant, and drag these pollinia along with it. And very common for the bee or insect to get stuck in this thing, not be able to get it away from it, because they're yanking, he's pulling, and they're yanking, and sometimes they actually pull the legs right off the bee. So like I said, it's not all sweetness. This one I just included because you guys are in the middle of grape land, right? I don't know if you have wild grapes here or not.
Yeah.
This is a wild grape. When the settlers first came here, they found what they call the fox grape. And it's a little tiny, tough little hard grape. And you can see why they started importing grapes from the old country, because this thing is a disaster. But over time, they began to cultivate it, and they developed the Concord grape and quite a few different other varieties from this particular wild grape rootstock. And then when French had that terrible phylloxera. Yeah, they were able to export the root stalks, and they grabbed their good varieties onto these American native grapes. And didn't think so poorly of them. This is just because it's beautiful, that's all. I went to Slovenia in 2003, and Slovenians are just like, the whole country is in love with bees and beekeepers, and a great deal of respect. But they all have these little houses, bee houses, and you know, we look at that and think, why aren't they just jamming them in their cheek to jowl? How can you move around? But that's just the way they do it. They just pack them in there, 20 or 30 in a space about this big, and they stack them on top of each other. You can see they have room for another layer on top of there, and they're open from the back instead of the top. You go in there up the other side. You're actually indoors, and they open from the back, and the frames pull out the back like that. It's completely different from what we think of. The main problem with that is the capacity. It's basically a 2-story hive, and they have a queen excluder in there, so the queen's in the bottom half, the honey's in the top half, and as soon as it starts to fill up, they have to start yanking the frames out like once a week. But it's pretty painless. Just open the back and puff a little bit of smoke, out they come. So, but the thing that struck me about this was they're obviously, very proud of their hives and their pollinator garden. This is another early spring bloomer. I think this is the purple section of the presentation. Yeah. This was put in here just because it's purple, and it's an iris. It's a very small, low to the ground iris, and with a beautiful yellow ramp saying, "Come hither." And I guess you probably all, since you're people that are interested in flowers and pollination, you already know that insects see other colors that we don't see, ultraviolet colors and stuff. So it looks quite a bit different from them to them. This is a Monarda. Monarda gets on the top list of all the lists of plants that you should plant if you want to attract pollinators. But this one is interesting because it's a native Monarda to our area. It's sort of a very pale purple.
Is that a bone bug?
You can call it that if you like. I don't. But bee balm, Oswego tea. Monarda actually is one of the main sources of thymol. When you hear about thymol, it's a thymol. It comes from a thyme plant. Well, most thymol does not come from thyme plants. The most abundant sources of it are Monarda and certain varieties of oregano. But again, a lot of these chemicals, what we call essential oils, I don't distinguish between essential oil and chemical. I think it's chemical. But a lot of these things are produced by plants over a wide range of species, even wide range of families. My wife in her ornamental garden, her botanical garden, had a section on just plants that have a lemon scent. And they're just as well as I do, there's just a wide variety of plants that produce a lemon scent, not just lemons. Lemon-scented geraniums. In fact, there's a whole bunch of different scented geraniums, even a chocolate-scented geranium. Again, this is another one of the purple Buddleia butterfly bush, and this is one of the ones that's on everybody's hit list for reasons that are unclear to me. I guess supposedly, if you plant it, then it goes in everybody else's yard. But I haven't seen that happen. I tried to diversify this presentation a little bit by including other pollinators. They're a lot harder to take pictures of. They seem to be a lot more sensitive to escaping when that big lens comes down. The honeybees and the bumblebees seem to be the easiest ones. They seem to be pretty bold. Yeah, this is a native in my area. It's a cardinal flower, lobelia, and you can see the pollen all over the petals there. Sepals, I'm not botanist. This is a begonia. Now, again, this is the red portion of the presentation. And also, one of my favorite things is light coming through the flowers. Now, I don't know if the pollinators are keen on that effect, or it's me. Hell, Yeah. I was trying to remember. I asked my wife before I left what that was called. Yeah, that's you have to get down on the ground and kind of look up underneath there. You know, I mean, taking pictures of these kind of plants really gets you in all kinds of positions that you probably wouldn't be. This is one of your guys' plants. So I got this in a greenhouse, of course, but all the mints have really attractive flowers that insects just really seem it seems like, I don't remember what speaker it was, that said it seemed to be just designed for an insect that size. But that's being a little bit, you know, what's the word? So being a little bit precious about it. The truth of the matter is that, especially in a region like coastal California, you have a lot of different flowers, a lot of different sized flowers, a lot of different sized insects. And you can find a moment where there's an insect in a flower and it's exactly the right fit, but that's pretty much the exception rather than the rule. And I wanted to emphasize that, and this has come up several times in the course of the day, that it's not about this species or that species. It's about all these species working as pollinating all these other plants as a what do you call it? An ecosystem. The whole ecosystem works best when it has lots and lots of different partners. The more, you know, everything's monoculture, but the more restricted that ecosystem becomes for one reason or another, the less successful it is. So my measurement on the success of an ecosystem is how healthy is that ecosystem? How healthy is it in responding to shocks? Suppose an invasive species comes in, can this topple that ecosystem? In most cases, a healthy ecosystem is not toppled by an invasive species. They usually come into a niche like a disturbed area, or they come in after there's been a fire, or they like, invasive species really like to, you know, come in along the side of streets where the habitat is disturbed. In a healthy ecosystem, it's very hard for an invasive species to get in and take over. End of rant. This is borage. This one actually, I don't know, I might have taken this one to Kathy Kellison's garden. But we do have borage. This is a wild rose. This is another one of the invasive species that everybody loves to hate. I have quite a few of them in my yard. And they're vicious, and they do spread. I have to go after them with a machete periodically to keep them in their place. But they, oddly enough, I've got 4 acres of solid woods, and they don't go into the woods. They mostly just hang around the edge of the yard, try to get into the yard where I mow. And as long as I keep that mowed, they don't come in there, and they're sort of like straddling the edge between the yard and the wood. They do start sending out runners. They're constantly trying to encroach, and those I just cut those down.
You should lock them in the basement with your other band.
I'm going to use that in my next presentation. To give you credit. This one is a little out of focus, but I just really like it because it's an action, sort of an action photo, and the pollen is just so, you know, it makes me want to take a bite.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It's a good thing that bees are so small, so that other people don't go after them with their fur.
Now you're getting it. This is a fly. I never knew anything about these flies until about 2 years ago, and I'm out there trying to take pictures of bees. And who are you guys? And they call it a syrphid fly, and they do a large amount of pollinating. And again, like I said, the difference between one of the most obvious differences between flies and bees and wasps are the flies only have 2 wings.
Peter?
Yes?
Is syrphid the same as a butterfly?
I think hoverflies are syrphid flies, but I can't swear it. You know another name for hoverflies is? The good news bees? Have you ever called good news bees? No, are you serious? Good news bees. The good news is they don't sting.
Flower flies or circuit flies?
Yeah, they are called butterflies, but they're all
Because they're connected. This is another plant that is frequently recommended to plant as an attractant to pollinators. Excuse me. It's a sunflower species. All the sunflower species seem to be attractive to bees. In fact, most of the composite family. And this is a native bee that lives in my yard. I don't know where it came from or where it goes in the wintertime. But it's just covered with pollen. This is another fly. I think this is a damselfly or dancing fly. I forget now, but it's again on this. Yeah. I just like the way it looks. This is one that I planted to try to attract moths because I heard that moths were attracted to the moonflower or datura, and I never saw a single thing coming. But, you know, I sat out there at night and I watched and I watched. And again, it had a great odor. So I guess I have to support what the other gentleman was saying about some plants just seem to be pretty much wedded to their pollinators. You know, other pollinators are not attracted to them, and they're not really interested in other pollinators. It's kind of fussy.
They're monogamous.
Yeah, there you have it. But this one is worth planting just because it smells so good when it's in bloom. And this was the moth I was trying to attract, I guess. I found this thing. There's a project at Cornell where the guy's raising these moths and these flowers and studying the relationship between the moths and the flowers. It's a Manduka moth, and that was what I was trying to attract. And I think they use a lot of tobacco flowers. This was my pride and joy with capturing this dude. Of course, if you've ever seen one of these things, you think they're a hummingbird. Then they sound like hummingbirds. You go, where's the hummingbird? This is, of course, a moth. And there's a couple of things that are really interesting about this picture to me. One, of course, is that it's a Monarda, and Monardas are just notorious for attracting all sorts of pollinators. Another thing is it's called the hummingbird clearwing moth. The wings are actually transparent, not even translucent, but you can see right through them. The third thing that cracks me up is it looks like it's got a tail like a lobster. He was just a little bit bigger. So again, like I said, I don't have expensive camera equipment. I don't have strobes. I don't have a lot of stuff. I just get lucky. I just take hundreds and hundreds of pictures, and I just get lucky once in a while. This is they always said about the bumblebee. And if an engineer would study the bumblebee, he would persuade you that they couldn't fly. They're just so ungainly. And here you look at that and think and go, he's never going to make it to that flower. So this plant here, my dear sweet wife planted it next to the house and just completely took over the yard. And she was a little embarrassed because I hope it doesn't get into the neighbor's yard because we're not supposed to be planting invasive plants. And I said, this thing is so attractive to bees. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to defend it. And it never, I don't think I ever saw a honeybee on it, despite the fact it was about 5 feet from my honeybee hives. But it attracted bumblebees and this little green guy. I think it's a Ceratina. Is there anybody here that recognizes native bees? So I took hundreds and hundreds of pictures of this little green guy. And not in this shot, but in another shot, you can see the pollen all over its tummy.
What's the plant?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Impatiens glandifera, the Himalayan balsam. In some areas, I guess it just takes over like crazy. But it's not very hard to get rid of. It's got a very, very succulent, tender thing. Basically, I can just whack it over. It's not like Japanese knotweed, which is just persistent. Right. This is there you can see the pollen on the morning. Yeah, no, I'm almost there. Yeah, I really am almost there. This time I timed it a little bit better. And so the first time I saw this was back in Slovenia. I went to Slovenia in 2003 because they had Apimondia there. I went there supposed to be attending Apimondia, but this is my first trip to Europe, so I kind of bailed out on the conferences and just traveled. Taking pictures all the way. This really is about the last picture, so we're doing good on time. And, this one I got last summer. I just noticed this guy rubbing around inside this melon. It's a hibiscus, I guess. But it's similar to hibiscus. We don't really have hibiscus in upstate New York. I don't think they're hardy. And I took bunches of pictures of this guy. Yeah, that's, I mean, thank you. You wait a long time to get a picture like this. It's just luck, trust me. So that's it, I really don't have any luck.